Warning, Geeking Toyetic is a show aimed at the adult collector, and as such features adult language and humor that is not appropriate for younger audiences. Viewer discretion advised.
Hello, is anybody there? Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me out there? Let me know, because we're doing the whole live stream thing. So, I see Alex is in the chat. Apprentice Alex's Acronistic Armory. Okay, John's there. Hey, John, what's going on? What's going on, everybody? Welcome to an episode of Geeking Toyetic. Man, it's been a while since I've done a Toyetic episode. I am happy to be here. As you can see, I've got all my toys behind me. For those that are going to listen to this later or watch this later, if you don't know who I am, I'm your host, Larry Roberts, and I am the resident toy fanatic in this part of the woods here at Geeking Poetic Podcast. So, Apprentice Alex, he says, hello, hello, hello. Is there anybody in there? Hey there. Okay, maybe I don't know if Alex can hear me or not. Let me know if you guys are having any issues with hearing me or if there's any kind of echo or anything like that, because I will fix it if so. But in the meantime, what I'm here to do is I have, for a while now, I've been gathering up some viewer questions that have to do with the toy collecting hobby. Man, there's a lot to go over. I got a lot of great questions. I was kind of bugging a bunch of you guys in the Geeking Squad group on Facebook, which is our official group where we handle all Geeking Poetic stuff. I was asking you guys for a while to submit questions, and I got a lot of them. I also got some questions that were given to me outside of the group through conversations I had with other people, people that private messaged me to talk about toys, because that's what nerds like me do, is we talk about toys and everything. Alex says, "Here you fine, just had to make a Pink Floyd reference." Oh, okay. Wrong show, Alex. This is not the Pink Floyd episode. I will be talking about Pink Floyd in the future. That's for damn sure. When we get into our music and vinyl talk, which, man, I'm eager to do that soon too. I know a bunch of you guys tuned in for the last thing I did when I talked about the records of 1973. That was a lot of fun. And I'm going to be doing more music talk soon, but yeah, it's long overdue for me to talk some toyetic stuff. I love doing the toyetic. I've always wanted to do this more frequently, and it's just difficult. We've got so much to tackle. But tonight seemed to work out really well because I'm on my own, basically. I've got Megan that's going to be helping out and handling the chat room and stuff, and hopefully Matt's going to be in the chat, and we're going to have all of us involved in one way or another, but I'll be the only ugly mug you're going to be looking at on camera tonight, so you're stuck with me. Anyway, so without further ado, I just thought it would be fun to talk about toy collecting. I get questions about it all the time, and I thought it was time to gather some up and address them. And by all means, for those of you who are in the live stream chat with me right now, I'm totally happy to answer your questions if you throw them out at me now, and I'll try to get to them in between these other questions that I already have picked out. So I know I'm going to take forever because I am very long-winded, and as you can tell by this long-ass intro. So I'm just going to jump right into it and start addressing these. So here we go. Question number one that I have, and sorry, I don't have the names. If any of you in the chat are the ones that asked me these questions, I didn't put a name to them, so you feel free to shout out in the chat and say, I asked that, and, claim your right to your rightful place there. Anyway, the first question is, what is your most prized toy that you own, and what is your holy grail? Now, for those that may not be familiar with what Holy Grail means in this instance, Holy Grail is usually a collectible item that is like the one that is always just a little bit out of reach and that you haven't attained yet, you don't own yet. I will address the Holy Grail first. Man, I don't think I have one Holy Grail. I think that there are certain ones that I really, really, really want more than others, but gosh, trying to think of what a Holy Grail would be. For example, one of my Holy Grails would be people are going to laugh at some of these, but I don't care. The Weebles Haunted House. I had the Weebles Haunted House when I was a child. Look it up if you've never seen it before. It came out right around, I think, like 1975, something like that. So I got it when I was basically a preschooler. And it was just so cool. Like, it just looked like the classic Scooby-Doo looking haunted house. And it came with Weebles. You folks, I'm sure know, most of you hopefully know what a Weeble is. The Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. I actually have them here. Or at least I did. I might have put them away. I've had Weebles hanging around with me. Yeah, I don't know if I have any back there right now. But Weebles Haunted House, that would definitely be one. It's very hard to get complete and in good shape, especially with the box. A lot of my Holy Grails are they're stuff from my really early childhood that I don't own because they're hard to get complete and they're hard to find with the box and stuff. So it'd be like Weebles Haunted House, the Fisher-Price Castle, from the Little People set. If anybody remembers the castle, that thing was so cool. Came with a dragon and a knight and a carriage, and it had trapdoors and a dungeon and a drawbridge. It was super cool. That's another one. The Navarone play set from Marks. That's another one that I've come really close to attaining again. But I actually never owned it. My buddy David, who I've talked about on this show many times, my buddy David owned the Navarone play set, which was like a really cool mountain. It was about, I don't know how big it was, probably about 22 inches tall. And you played with little plastic army men with it and everything. And gosh, just so much fun. Those are good examples of it. Getting into like later stuff, it would probably be, there's still more Shogun Warriors that I need. I've got a couple of Shogun Warriors like Mazinga and Raideen and stuff, but I'd love to get Godzilla again. If anybody remembers Godzilla, he had that fist that launched off his arm, which made no sense whatsoever because Godzilla never did that. But I used to have that as a kid, so that's another one that's a Holy Grail. Gosh, I'm trying to think if there's any other Holy Grails that I really, really want. Yeah, it's a tough one. If I think of something else, I'll throw it out there later. As far as what my most prized toy that I own is, man, that's like asking somebody what their favorite child is, although there's probably some of you out there that can actually answer that, even though if you may not admit it in public. Again, I've got several, I have the Star Wars Death Star playset. I think I have that. It's back here somewhere. I think it's buried right now. I've got the Star Wars Death Star playset from 1978, 79. I've got that in the box, so that's one that I cherish. My Mego Thor figure I cherish because I have sentimental value for that, having to do with my old, unfortunately passed on best friend Jerry. That was a figure that he and I searched for years. We could never find the Mego Thor, and then like a year, maybe not even a year after Jerry passed. I actually found Amigo Thor complete for the most ridiculously cheap price. Like, there's no way this should have been that cheap. So you could call it silly, you could call it superstitious, whatever. I kind of feel like Jerry guided me to that figure and found that for me. That was like his little parting gift, you could say. So I have a lot of sentimental attachment to my Thor. Yeah, my vintage Star Wars figures that I have, all of it, all of my stuff means a lot to me. So, I try to take care of my stuff. I cherish my stuff, but, understand, I'm not one of these pathetic guys like you see on like the comic book store guy or something on The Simpsons. That's like, don't touch my stuff. It's their things, I mean, I'm not one of these wacko collector guys like you see online that gets way too worked up about this stuff. I take it all very much in stride. They're just fun hobby toy things to have, and they mean a lot to me, but I don't get too worked up about them. So anyway, that's the best I can answer that question. I think we have questions coming in already. Alex asked, any toys from recent years that really make you go, holy crap, wish I had that as a kid? Yeah. Oh man, there's quite a few of that. There's some really cool stuff. One of the first thing that jumps out in my mind was a toy that I picked up, I think last year or back in 2020, maybe recently. Playmobil, of all things, started coming out with Ghostbuster toys. You may or may not have seen them. And I think I might have even talked about them a little bit on the show before. But Playmobil came out with a really cool Ghostbusters fire station play set. And it comes with the figures, and it's really detailed. It is fantastic, man. And, I know there were Ghostbuster toys in the 80s. By the time that came out, I was out of toys. I really wasn't into toys anymore at that point. And the Ghostbuster toys from the 80s, I have some of that stuff now, are really cool. But, man, these Playmobil ones that they came out with are just so much fun. Like, honestly, even as a grown-ass man, I want to open it up and play with it and set it up because it's just so neat. It's so well done. That's the first one that comes to mind. There's been a lot of really cool Migos because, as I've talked plenty about before, I'm a Migo collector, and Migo came back in 2019 as a company, started making figures again, and there's a bunch of Migo figures that have been coming out in the last few years that are fantasy fulfillment figures. There's like really cool Hammer horror monster figures that were never made back in the day that I would have loved as a kid, and more Star Trek aliens and stuff that they never made that they're making now. There's lots of really cool stuff that I really wish they would have made when I was a kid, especially some of the Lego sets that they have now, because I loved Legos as a kid. But all the stuff they had when I was younger was kind of like your typical, more generic sort of Lego sets. Now, you can make, Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. Like, they make these really elaborate Lego sets. That's the kind of stuff, man, I would have just loved to have those when I was a little kid. So, yeah, I feel like that pretty much covers it. Like there's always like really cool stuff coming out. I mean, that's part of the joy of being an adult toy collector, is that not only buying the old stuff and the retro stuff that reminds you of things you had as a child or whatever, but seeing the new stuff and going, gosh, I want to play with that now. I don't really play with my toys too much, although don't tempt me, because lately I've been kind of bored and going, I think I'm just going to open some of these up and play with them, because why the hell not? It's my life. It's too short. But yeah, seeing comments, Carl or Carrie B says, kids these days get the coolest Legos. Wish I had that option too. Yeah, exactly. Man, the things that the kids get nowadays are so complex. I don't necessarily need everything to be that complex, even as a kid. There were cool, really complex toys and stuff as a kid, and Sometimes I would just gravitate towards the simple Fisher-Price stuff and everything, but it would have been nice to have that option for sure. Luke mentioned his Star Trek collection. Yep, yeah. He's got an incredible Star Trek collection. He's got almost every figure and weapon and toy and play set that Playmates put out for the Next Gen figures. And Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, he collected from, what was it? It was like 92 through almost the end of the 90s. He has almost every figure. Man. Joe says WWE collection from the 1980s. Yep. Yeah. Oh, I love those WWE figures, man. Back when it was WWF. I loved all those, and the AWA figures. They're great. Yeah. Anyway, all right, I'm going to move on and address some of these other questions that I already have from viewers from other times. Let me see what we have. Let's see. I think we'll go with this one. Got a question. Pretty sure Jeep asked me this one. Loose or in the original package, which do you prefer? Honestly, that's not an easy question. I generally prefer to get them in the package when I can. I'd rather get things in the package, and then if I want to open it, I'll open it. You know, I like having the option. There's some toys that I don't care so much about collecting in the package. Like, for example, the aforementioned Fisher-Price toys like Little People, Adventure People, stuff like that. I don't really have a nostalgic collection to their packaging too much, and the Adventure People packaging was pretty generic, you know. It was fine, but it's not something that like necessarily looks beautiful on my shelf, you know what I mean? I'm fine with just getting the actual toys and setting them up on my shelves and displaying them diorama style. I don't need those in packages, but when it comes to a lot of my action figures and stuff, yeah, I prefer getting them in the package, whether it's modern or vintage. And I know there's a lot of people, it's a big debate in the toy community. There's a lot of debate that goes on regarding collectors being too hung up on packaging and packaging condition and stuff. And I get that. A lot of collectors sit there and say toys are meant to be open and they're meant to be played with or they're meant to be displayed, whatever. Oh, okay. I get that. To each their own. But the thing is like for me, a lot of my positive memories of toys isn't just around the toy itself. It's around the packaging as well. I mean, so much of my nostalgia is about walking into a store and seeing that toy in that box or on that card or whatever. And the cool artwork, because especially back in the 70s and 80s, man, even in the 90s, they had great box art and great designing. The new packages for toys nowadays, for a lot of the modern toys, with a few exceptions, they're okay. But that old stuff is great. And that's why so many of us love things like Star Trek or Star Wars, the vintage collection figures, the TVC figures. I mean, let's face it, so much of that is we're buying those figures because of that card that it's on, because it looks like a vintage card from 1980 or whatever. So I think packaging is important, and but it depends. It depends on the toy. I'm good with loose toys, especially if it's like ridiculously expensive to get packaged. If I really want, I don't know, a Star Wars Droid Factory playset from 1979. I mean, if I could get a really minty one that's not in the box and I can get it for $50 or something, and my next option is to get a boxed one and it's going to cost me $400, odds are I'm going to go for the $50 loose one because I'm good with that. But if I have the option to get it in a box, I'll get it in the box. And then if I feel like opening it later, I'll open it later. It just depends. I like having the option. We got a lot of chat going on in here. Joe, even now I have the WWE Retro Elite series, and I miss my AWA figures. Yeah, and those AWA figures are getting pricey on the aftermarket too. I've got a couple of buddies that collect those, and they're not cheap, man. And especially finding, because wrestling figures, they got beat up, I mean, those things were pretty sturdy, but kids were rough on those things. That's what they were made for. So finding them in like good especially minty, mint kind of condition, good luck with that. Collectors need to figure out when to make those toys breathe. Well, it depends. I agree with that, Joe. Sometimes, I think a lot of times, I think there are toys that are just meant to be opened. And I think a lot of modern toys tend to be marketed in that way and put out there in that way, where I don't think the new packaging for a lot of toys is for example, let's look at something like Marvel Legends figures, right? The figures are fantastic. The packaging is okay. There's nothing about the packaging that makes me go, oh, that's a gorgeous package. It's just okay. I mean, it's a big window box. It's serviceable, but the real allure of that is the figures. So buying Marvel Legends and opening them up, posing them, especially since they're pretty hyper articulate and stuff, absolutely. But again, when talking about things like the Star Wars Vintage Collection, stuff like that, well, to me, the package is just as important to me as the figure itself. And so it all depends on the toy. Let's see. Carrie B says, as much as I would love it packaged, my loose Batman as an Arkham prisoner is one of my favorite toys. We'll even open some Funkos if they're cheap and know I'll save another way. Either way, yeah. Funko is a good example of that. I love Funko Pop figures. I keep them in the box most of the time, for it's more convenient in terms of storage and stuff like that. But Funkos are the kind of things that, I got no problem opening them up and displaying them because I think they look better displayed out of the box personally. But of course, that's going to affect it in terms of resale value. I'm not a resale value collector generally. I'm not saying I've never bought anything with resale potential in mind, but generally, I'm not a resale guy. I haven't sold a toy in years. I used to own a collectible store 20 plus years ago. I did that whole thing. It had its ups and downs. We might talk a little bit more about that as we go on here. Joe says, I have a few of the McFarlane DC figures. I will never, ever make them breathe. Yeah, it depends. That's what I said. Perfect example. You just never know. It all depends. Do what you want with your toys. If they're meant to be in the package, leave them in the package. If they're meant to be played with or displayed openly and posed, man, do it. It's all up to you. These are your toys. All right, moving on. When did you start collecting and what was the first toy line you collected? Yeah, I'd love to hear the answers from you guys in the chat too about this, because it's fun comparing when everybody started collecting and stuff like that and what lured you into it. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. As a kid, I stopped being into toys right around 1984. At that point, I was in like 6th grade, 7th grade, somewhere around. I was in junior high, I know that, in 1984. And I still thought toys were kind of cool, but I couldn't be bothered with buying toys. I certainly really wasn't playing with them anymore. And by that point, I was buying guitars and rock and metal records and t-shirts and going to concerts and all that business. So from 1984 up until like late 1989, toys were just kind of a void for me. I never went to a toy store unless I was going to buy a present for a, family member or something like that for Christmas. And that's actually how I got back into toy collecting in the Christmas of 1989, November, December 1989. My mom and I went to South Lake Mall and we went to a KB Toys. It was the first time I'd been there in years. And we were buying presents for one of my cousins. Could have even been my cousin John that's in the chat right now. Might have been buying some for you, John, because you were still probably into toys at that point. And I happened to walk down the action figure aisle and I saw a bunch of DC superheroes that were put out by a company called Toy Biz. And they were the 3 3/4 inch figures. And they were basically more or less like reproductions, reusing the same look and everything from the Kenner Superpowers line that came out in the mid 80s. But here's the thing. I missed the Kenner Superpowers line. I'm fully aware of them now, think they're great now, but I did not buy those or play with them or collect them. I missed Superpowers entirely. So I ended up really being infatuated with these DC superheroes that I saw on the shelves because they had characters that I never had as a little kid. They had Hawkman, Green Lantern, they had some other cool ones like Aquaman, Lex Luthor, like they just all these really cool characters that I was blown away. And I mentioned it to my mom. I was like, those are so freaking cool. And I bought a Hawkman figure because I was like, that was one of my dream figures as a kid. I always wished they'd made a Hawkman Mego figure, and they never did. So I bought the Hawkman. Well, that Christmas, Mom, just kind of like as a little fun gift kind of thing. I don't think she figured I was going to be super excited about it, but she bought me a bunch of those figures, threw them in a box, wrapped it, and got me Green Lantern and whoever else was in that assortment, Riddler, Lex Luthor, Robin, etc., etc. And I opened them on Christmas, and it was cool because it was like even though I was still technically a kid because I was like finishing high school, I was like 18 years old or something. Even though I was still technically a kid, it felt like old Christmas, like I was already getting nostalgic at that point, and I just fell in love with those figures. And then, of course, from there, I was like, well, I want to get the rest of them, whichever ones she didn't get for me. So then I started going out trying to find the rest of those DC figures. Then, very shortly around that time, Toy Biz started coming out with the Marvel superhero figures where they had Spider-Man and Captain America and the Punisher and all that. And then I was like, oh shit, because I'm an even bigger Marvel fan. I had to buy those. Then shortly after that, they started coming out with the X-Men figures, that first wave of X-Men figures. I was way into X-Men. I mean, and at this point, it's 1991. And I was pretty much, hooked. But at that point, I was buying all new figures. I was buying all new stuff that was coming out. And then I walked into a comic book store and I saw a carded Mego Spider-Man on the shelf that they were selling. And I bought that for myself for my birthday in January of 1991. And at the same time, the guy at the comic book store said, hey, if you're into vintage toys, you should buy this Toy Shop magazine newspaper thing because it's all ads of people buying and selling and trading vintage toys and modern toys. And from that moment, all of this shit I was doomed. I didn't even know, even when I first started collecting the Toy Biz figures in 89 and 90, I didn't know that toy collecting was a thing. I thought it was just some quirk of mine. I did not realize that it was already like a pretty full-fledged hobby. Nowhere near as big as it is now, but it was still there. So once I got that Mego Spider-Man and I got that issue of Toy Shop and I saw that I could start ordering old toys again. Ooh, yeah. So that was it for me. Okay, getting back to the chat real quick. Joe said Funkos, depending on the type, could be displayed properly. For example, the Nosferatu Funko from a few years ago will never ever see the light of day outside. Yeah, I get that. When he was 5 years old, He-Man, and then WWF. I had the Joker Toy Biz figure. Yep, I remember that one very well. And Bob the Goon from the... Yeah, exactly. That's right. And that was the other thing, too, because, see, when the Batman Tim Burton movie came out in 89, that sort of reignited my fascination. I mean, I was still into comic books and stuff to a degree all through high school. Not hardcore, but I was still reading occasionally. But the Tim Burton movie came out, and that sort of like really reignited my interest in comics and superheroes. And then I saw they came out with the just a few figures that Toy Biz did. That Batman movie wasn't the greatest line of figures I've ever seen. It definitely got better when the line got picked up by Kenner the following year, but still, it was enough to lure me in. So yeah, good call on that silly Bob the Goon figure. Alex says, slight aside, the actor playing Hawkman and Black Adam looks fantastic. I am so out of it when it comes to all the DC Universe shows. I've never watched Supergirl. I am so out of it. It's one of those things where one of these days I'm going to do this massive just like binge of all that DC stuff, because I've seen little bits and pieces of it, and I know that a lot of it is fantastic. I just don't have the time right now. John Forst says, for collecting's sake, it was starting lineups. Oh, I remember that very well. You and your brother and your dad. Yeah. When I had my store, you guys came in and were looking for starting lineups. I was always looking out for those starting lineups for you. And did you hear, by the way, John, did you hear that they just announced, Hasbro just announced that starting lineups, they are revamping and restarting that series again. They're going to do new starting lineups, and a lot of people are really excited about that. I'm very, very curious to check that out. So later, the Simpson toy figures. Yeah, those got really popular. I have a couple of them, but those were really popular. Carrie said she started collecting Beanie Babies. Oh, yeah, I've got a bunch of Beanie Babies as well. I've got a whole box of them. I was never like really good at collecting Beanie Babies, like in terms of knowing which ones were like hot and which ones weren't. I just kind of bought the ones I thought looked cool, looked cute. But I've got a bunch of them. Super collector boyfriend Joe, yeah, okay, has turned me into a more serious collector. Yeah, it happens. It spreads. You can ask, you can ask Jess. You can ask Meg. I have a tendency to make other people want to collect more, and then they get mad at me because they're like, "Why am I spending all this money on this stuff?" Right? She's giving me looks right now. John Force says he probably had almost every He-Man made. Yeah, I remember playing with your He-Man figures with you over at Nanny's house, you know, and you had all the stuff. You had Castle Grayskull. You had really cool stuff. Yeah, I admittedly, because when I was a little old, like that time in the mid 80s, when I was too old to be playing with toys, I did get a kick out of coming over on the weekend with all the relatives and getting to sit down on the floor and play with you and your toys a little bit and stuff. You know, I was getting to live vicariously through you. Joe, the 1991, the WCW figures from Gloob, I remember those. 95, 98, WWF Jakks. I have a bunch of the WWF Jakks figures. Yeah, those some of those were really great. Original San Francisco toy maker. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The San Francisco ones, the WCW ones. They look. Yeah, they did. They look like the WWF LJN figures. I have some of those too. I remember what a big deal it was when they came out with the Giant figure and that, because like there was no Giant, pre-Big Show Giant. Only had one Kenner Batman figure. That's funny. Oh, John, good. Yeah, you'll have to let your dad and Jamie know about those starting lineups. So I get more info about it, and they start releasing like pictures. I will do a Toyetic episode where I talk about that. I haven't done a toy news episode in a while, so it's like long overdue. You know. So, all right, moving on to the next question. Let's see what we have. Do you think retro toys are outselling modern? That's another one where it kind of depends on the particular market you're aiming for and you're specifically referring to. I think when it comes to younger buyers, when it's coming to like kids that are maybe like tween age and younger, no, I don't think the retro toys necessarily are that big of a deal. I think they're much more interested in the modern stuff, whether it's the modern girls stuff, I guess it's not just for girls, but you know what I mean? Those lines that tend to be more geared towards that, because they've got, I don't even know. I'm so out of it with a lot of that now. Those toy lines that are out with that. I remember like LOL Secrets and all those kind of things that were coming out. I definitely think when it comes to younger fans of those kind of toy lines, I think they tend to go more modern than retro. I think especially, with the things like Barbie and Strawberry Shortcake. Although, that being said, it seems like Strawberry Shortcake and Care Bears and a lot of that still holds weight. I think with both, with any of these toys, I think it kind of depends on what you're talking about, retro or modern. Or if you're talking about retro design versus modern design, or are you talking about a retro product line? Like because, for example, I know loads of younger kids that just absolutely love Transformers. They're fanatic about Transformers. And they're not buying the G1 Transformers. They're buying like the new stuff, Siege and the Studio Series and all that kind of stuff. They're into that. So they like the modern versions of it, but I mean Transformers is a toy line technically from our childhood. It's from the early 80s. So it depends. I think when it comes to older collectors like that are around my age or a little younger and stuff, I think we lately are probably buying much more of the retro toys, because all you got to do is walk into Target and everything is a retro toy. It's retro Masters of the Universe, retro Star Wars figures, you know, like the ones they just came out with for The Mandalorian that are done in the old retro style. You know, the retro style, the G.I. Joes, you know, they're coming out with those again and everything. So it's definitely popular, but I think it's going to depend on the demographic. So for older collectors, yeah, I think retro is more popular. For younger collectors, for teens and younger and stuff, no, I think the modern is still more their thing, which isn't to say there isn't any younger collectors that are into retro stuff, but just from what I've seen, I think they generally care more about the more modern designs of everything. So what do we got? Joe says, I would think the retro design is making a comeback. No, it's definitely. I mean, it's really popular. The retro stuff is really popular. I'm just not sure that it's really catching on as hardcore with the younger audience. I think it's really more made to entice the middle-aged people. You know what I mean? Because we have the nostalgia towards that retro design. Super 7, yeah, Super 7 is, I mean, that's all super retro, you know, it's really cool. And what's great about Super 7 is that they don't just do retro. I mean, they tried to do like some cool new concepts and stuff too. Like they're just all across the board. I know people complain sometimes about Super 7 and their prices and stuff, but overall, I think it's worth it. Even the 5 points of articulation stuff, when you think about what you're getting, and you know, a lot of these, again, like fantasy figures, like things that you would fantasize about when we were kids getting and we never got. And now they're making it for us, and they make it in those amazing packages, amazing art, especially if you're an in-package collector like me. I could see if you're a loose collector and you're not that into Super 7 because it's too expensive and you're just going to open it. I kind of get that. But if you're a package collector like me, oh man, Super 7 stuff is fabulous. Alex says, little inside baseball. One of my best friends is an engineer at Hasbro, and every one of the designers and engineers there collects something pre-98. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, yeah, you know, it's collecting that old stuff is what, you know, made them, you know, an engineer at Hasbro. That I get it. So anyway, moving on. We're on to question number 5. I only have a few more of the pre-submitted questions. So we'll see what this is. Any new releases that are mass produced that are going to sustain or gain value? And are there any older toys that never really took off that are now beginning to gain steam in the collector market? Yeah, those are two really good questions. In terms of new releases that are mass produced that are going to sustain and gain value, that's tough. That's a really hard one to answer because you never know. I think that safe bets would be things that seem like they've already spanned generations. Like, say, for example, Star Wars figures. People are going to say I'm biased for saying that. I bitch about modern Star Wars stuff all the time in terms of not like certain channels. I won't name names. If people I'm sure out there know who it is that bitches about modern Star Wars all the time. I like modern Star Wars. I obviously collect it, but I bitch about it in terms of just that there's so much of it. It's expensive. You know, you can't be a completist at all with modern Star Wars stuff. So you have to kind of pick and choose your battles there with what you're going to try to complete. But I think a lot of modern Star Wars stuff, especially when you get into like the vintage collection, even some of the Black Series stuff, things like that. I think that those are pretty solid in terms of retaining value, just because, again, you've got so many generations that are collecting it. There are 8-year-old kids that are fervently collecting Star Wars, the Vintage Collection toys and Black Collection toys, but there's also 49-year-old men that are collecting that, and there's 65-year-old men that are collecting it, and it appeals to all. Forgive me, I keep saying men. People, because there are loads of all men and women, all different kinds of people are collecting Star Wars. It's one of those things that crosses ages and genders and any kind of demographic. Like, it appeals across the board. It's just like the Beatles. It's like you find 6-year-old kids that love the Beatles, and yet there's 76-year-old, overgrown kids that still love the Beatles. It's one of those things. I think things like Star Wars is a solid investment. Some of the DC and Marvel stuff, because again, it keeps going on. It goes past any kind of age gap, there, any age boundary. I don't really collect in terms of value. I mean, I've passed up all kinds of toys in the past that probably would have been a really sound investment for resale. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm not buying this stuff for resale. I mean, it's not to say I won't possibly sell it one day. If I have no room for it anymore or no need for it or something happens, I mean, I may sell these toys, but that's not why I collect. I think, and we'll get a little bit into more stuff because I know there's another question coming up that has to do with collecting guidelines and stuff. But yeah, I would say the superhero stuff and the Star Wars stuff are pretty sound investments if you're thinking about resale, because they keep going on. They've got new fans. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. It's not like investing in Spawn figures back in the 90s, and unfortunately now, I mean, it's still around and it's still got a fan base, and it's kind of come back a little bit, but it doesn't have that kind of multi-generational staying power that something like Star Wars does. So that's what I would say for that. And as far as older toys that never really took off, that are now beginning to gain steam, man, that's tough to say, because to a certain degree, anything old becomes popular in a way. You know what I mean? Like, anything that's old, there's figures that I used to see back in the late 80s, early 90s that were in the dollar bin at KB Toys, that now you go and buy it on the aftermarket and it's going to cost you $100 or something like that. I mean, to a certain degree, anything old is going to have that allure. But when I think of the stuff that is really like crazy, like, holy shit, I can't believe how much that costs now, I would say a lot of the knockoff toys. We've talked about knockoff toys because I'm always supporting, Brian Heiler and from Plaid Stallions and his Toy Ventures magazine. I'm going to give him a plug again because Brian's awesome, and his publications that he puts out are so fucking entertaining and, valuable. So, a lot of the stuff that he talks about and he features are a lot of these toy lines that came out in the late 70s, even early 80s, that were basically like knockoffs, like, the Lincoln Monsters that came out back in the late 70s, and some of the Remco stuff. And a lot of those things, like when those things came out, they were considered like dime store toys. Essentially, they weren't made as good as Mego or as Kenner toys and stuff like that. They were definitely like an inferior product in terms of quality control, and a lot of times they were done sort of not like the most legal licensing was going on there. They were doing a workaround with licensing, so that it didn't look too much like Bela Lugosi or look too much like, Lon Chaney or something like that. And those things back then, I mean, again, yeah, they were looked at as, these were discount toys. These were cheap toys that I would get at Ben Franklin, for $1 or $2 at the most. Those toys are worth so much money now because not too many people kept them. Not too many, because again, nobody thought they were going to be worth a damn. They were just throwaway stuff, really. But a lot of us either have fond memories of it because we bought those toys when we were kids and they were a lot of fun and they remind us of our childhood. And, monster stuff, monster toys and everything have gotten so popular now, and you can't find those toys. And so there's way more demand than there is supply. So that's probably the main one, I would say. That's probably the biggest one that was like something that was just not a big deal at the time, was looked at as cheap and throwaway, and now is worth way more than the toys that they were copying. Because like the Mego monsters, like they're worth money, but they ain't worth as much as those knockoff ones from like Lincoln and those other like little companies like that, and AHI Toys that were doing these very kind of, sketchy versions of them and stuff. They're wonderful. They're just so hard to get and expensive. So that's probably the main one. So if you know anybody that has any of those old monster figures like that from the 70s that's still lurking in their mom's basement or grandma's attic or something like that, get them. To see if you can get them in your hands, because they are valuable. Anyway, so moving on. No more questions. I think I've bored you guys to death, but. All right, we got the question number 6 here from the pre-submitted ones. Let's see, where are we at? Here we go. How about, what suggestions do you have for new collectors, both adult collectors as well as kids who are starting to collect toys? My first suggestion is buy what you like. Collect things that you are really interested in. Like, collect things that you love having, that you love looking at, that have some sort of emotional value for you. You know what I mean? Something like for example, just mentioned here in the chat, says dying for some more Michael Myers figures and they're ridiculously priced. So there you go. She wants Michael Myers figures and stuff. So buy Michael Myers figures. Like, yeah, if you're a big fan, you're like, oh, I'm way into horror or something like that. And, then collect horror figures. Buy the things you want and don't worry about how much it's going to be worth. Okay? Like, don't worry about the resale. I'm not saying don't care at all about the value of your toys. Toys ending up being valuable is a happy side effect of some of this, but it's not recommended, especially not when you're first getting into collecting. I don't recommend it because it's a risky venture. It's really risky. Even when buying older toys that are worth money and stuff like that, there's so many factors involved that can affect the value of a toy, because these things, they're not gold. It's not platinum. It's not, precious minerals or anything like that, or freaking gasoline or something like that. These are not things that were ever meant to be valuable in an aftermarket kind of way. They just happen to be that way for one reason or another, either because sometimes things got made in smaller numbers or had a shorter shelf life, or people didn't think it was that cool when it first came out, but then it got popular later, and you know what I mean? And so then everybody wants it and there wasn't enough made. Kind of like what I was saying about those cheap monster figures a minute ago. There's always things that can cause toys to be hot. And then, of course, we all know that toy companies make toys nowadays specifically to be collectors, limited edition, numbered collector's items. And sometimes those are valuable and they retain their value. And a lot of times, though, they don't. A lot of times they just don't. They're kind of a flash in the pan. And, I would suggest you buy whatever makes you happy. That's the first and foremost thing about being a new collector. Don't sit there and worry about like, well, but if I buy this, is it going to be worth this much in a few years? That's not going to bring you happiness. Having stuff that you can look over on your shelf or in your closet or in your walls or wherever you put your collection, having stuff that you can walk in the room and look at, and it's going to put a smile on your face and go like, man, that stuff's so cool. Like, I'm so happy I have that. Look how cool that looks. That's why you should collect, first and foremost. And then if things end up being worth money, that's just the party bonus. That's my main bit of advice for you. And the other bit of advice, and because we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute too, is educate yourself. When I started collecting toys back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was no way, there was no internet. There really wasn't a whole lot in the way of like publications just yet. They came out pretty shortly thereafter with Tomarts and Lee's, and these different companies started making Action Figure Digest and stuff like that. And that was a big help. But at first there really wasn't, it was kind of the Wild West, like it was a wilderness. It really wasn't any way to know about things. There was a lot of rumors and a lot of theories and a lot of false information. So the best thing to do is educate yourself on toys, because it's easy to find it. Watching channels like mine, I'm sorry I'm beating my own chest here, but that's what I'm here for, is watching channels like mine. And there's much, much, much better shows out there on YouTube that will explain things to you, and people that can answer things. A lot of times if you see a toy that's supposed to be really rare and you see somebody that's selling it for a ridiculously cheap price and it seems like it's too good to be true, it's probably because it is, because it's not legit. There's a lot of reproductions and people that are trying to rip you off out there and stuff. So educate yourself on what you're collecting so that you don't make costly mistakes. Even if you're not collecting to make money, you also don't want to lose money on this stuff. You don't want to go and spend a ton of money on something that you find out you basically got ripped off for. So educate yourself, buy the things that you love and mean the most to you and are going to be a sentimental item for you. That's my advice. Yes, Joe just said education and research is key. Yeah, exactly. And again, not even just because you're going to try to make a mint off of collecting, but just so you don't get ripped off, because there are a lot of, in any hobby out there, it doesn't matter what you're collecting. It could be baseball cards and Pokemon cards. It could be toys. It could be coins. It could be, any sports memorabilia. There is just tons of people out there that are really eager to rip you off. So educate yourself. All of the information you need is free and out there on the internet now. Spend the time watching videos, reading articles, from trustworthy sources. And, that's the other thing. And also, eBay. Don't base value on eBay, because I see people do that all the time. People are going, oh, this is worth, hundreds of dollars. And I go, where did you get that from? Well, I saw on eBay. Okay, well, here's the problem with eBay. eBay, first of all, there's a difference between what people are asking for and what's actually selling on eBay. You might have a toy that there's 5 guys right now that are all asking $1,000 for, but is anybody buying it? No. Do the search history, go look into the sold completed sales, and then all of a sudden you look and you go, wait a minute, somebody 2 months ago bought that same item for $200. Yeah, exactly. Toys are only worth what people are willing to pay for them. You can have something that could be the rarest toy on the planet, but if nobody's willing to pay the price you're asking for it, then is it really worth that much? So again, yeah, it's all education here. So that's that's a good bit of info to have. Let's see. Okay. I know where these questions came from. I had to include this because it just made me laugh. This is from my buddy Colin. He says, if you owned a toy company, what toy or toys would you reproduce other than the Micronauts? And what is the greatest collectible, and why is it the Micronauts? Because Colin, much like me, is a big fan of the Micronauts, man. Micronauts are so great. I've got Micronauts here behind me again somewhere. They're buried in the, I've got toy. What you see behind me is literally like one 1/100th of what I have, maybe. Maybe it's probably not even not even that much. It's probably, I have a lot of toys. These are just ones that I threw up there and said, yeah, those will look good. I love Micronauts. They've tried relaunching Micronauts on a couple of occasions. It just, man, that toy line is just so doomed. It's ridiculous. Even the Micronauts themselves was when it came out in the mid 70s, was a relaunch of Japanese, Micromen from, I think, Takara, which I have some of those as well. So if I owned a toy company, what toys would I reproduce? So you're meaning an old toy line. I would love to bring back Shogun Warriors. Now, I realize that Shogun Warriors in some form or another have been produced over the years, and we've even had like new things, like there was that Skeletor that came out, and there was a Boba Fett and a Stormtrooper that came out. These came out in Japan, and they were basically modeled and made to look just like the 24-inch Shogun Warriors. The ones obviously I grew up with were not the Japanese ones. They were the American, adaptation of them that Mattel put out in 1977. But those are the ones I would probably reproduce. And I'd be down for, altering them slightly in order to, prevent people from freaking out that they're too exact reproductions of the originals, and screwing with the original value and all that kind of business. I think, you could change there's certain paint things you could change, different things you could do to them to make them more modern. But yeah, I mean, if a company like Hasbro or somebody could get the rights to those and reproduce the 24-inch Shogun Warrior figures, all of them, the original 3 Great Mazinga, Raiding, and Dragon, and even like Geeking and stuff like that. If they could redo those, if I could have a company, I would probably go for that, as well as the little like 5-inch ones, the die-cast ones. I didn't care about those die-cast ones that much when I was a kid, because I just wanted the big ass ones, right? Now as an adult, those little die-cast ones they came out with, oh man, I want those so bad. Those are beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love those. So yeah, that would be my number one choice for reproducing. And my second thing, if I could reproduce, I guess I don't know. I guess it's kind of silly because there are other companies that do similar things, but I would love to bring back like the Adventure People. Even if it was done, Fisher-Price in the recent years, they came out with a bunch of repro toys. Some of you may have seen them. They came out in like old brown packaging. Again, I had those around here. Of course, everything I'm talking about, I don't have up anymore. This is what I get for moving everything. But like, you remember like the little rolly telephone thing, like you've seen in Toy Show or Toy Story? Yeah, the movie Toy Story and stuff. The little rotary chatter telephone guy and stuff. They re-released that. They re-released the speak and say kind of thing. Is he up there? Oh yeah, there's my chatter telephone. He's right up here. But things like that, they've, Fisher-Price did a whole bunch of like repro stuff, and they've reproduced stuff like Light Bright and Rock'em Sock'em Robots and all that kind of stuff. I would love if Fisher-Price would bring back just a couple of the Adventure People play sets, maybe like the Safari one with all the animals and the Jeep and all that. And that might be a little controversial now. I know how people feel about Safari stuff. They could even change it to make it a little bit more correct. But they had things like that, and they had the deep sea dive one with the boat and the dolphin and all that stuff. If they did a couple of those, oh my God, you will just see Larry lose his ever-loving mind. I would be first in line to buy those at the store, because God, I love Fisher-Price Adventure People. Those were some of the most fun toys to play with as a kid ever. I have. Even more than Star Wars and stuff, I have the most fond memories of playing with those Fisher-Price Adventure People. So, yeah, that's what I would pick. If I could, make a company and sidle up to Fisher-Price and be like, hey, let's make some retro style Adventure People sets. Now, I know there's other like companies that have put out like toys that are similar to that and everything, like that have like helicopters and play sets and all that kind of stuff that are very similar to Adventure People, but it's still not quite the same. I've got one right here. Like, I'm sure some of you, hang on while I adjust this. I'm sure some of you have seen things like this. Like, I went and I bought this, and for those that can't see, what I'm holding up is this 68-piece Rescue Team City Fire play set. And this is very similar. It's a modern version, but it's very similar to what those Adventure Team play sets were like. This is just much bigger, much more elaborate. It's got sounds and action features and stuff. I love stuff like this. That's why I bought it. I am going to, yeah, there you go. See, it actually makes noises and stuff, and the characters talk. It's great. I couldn't help. I found this was on like closeout. I got this like super cheap, and I had to buy it because I was like, that is exactly like the kind of toys that I'm talking about, the Adventure People stuff. I'm glad they still make stuff like this. I really, for those of you that have kids, buy your kids this stuff. You know, I know they all want like the name brand things, and I'm not saying don't get that. I wanted name brand stuff when I was a kid too. I wanted my Star Wars and DC and all that kind of stuff, but this stuff's so much fun. So much fun. Kids will be really happy to play with that stuff, even if they think they won't. You watch. You know. So anyway. Yeah, so that's probably what I would do. And what is the greatest collectible, and why is it Micronauts? He asked. Well, besides Micronauts, greatest collectible? Oh, come on, man. I can't pick that. Obviously, I love Star Wars. I love Migos. I love, yeah, I don't know, man. That's a tough call. Again, the Adventure People. I mean, it's Adventure People's got to be in my top 5. I mean, and it's hard to collect that and get that complete because there were so many pieces. And trying to collect it in the box, forget about it. Oh man, that's super hard. All right, so we're to the last question here. I know this is going kind of long, but and this one. Okay, I saved this for last because this is a little bit of a controversial topic. The question was, what's your opinion on reproductions, and do you think they hurt the collecting hobby? Okay, so that's not an easy one to answer. I think it depends on the way you're looking at it. Can reproductions hurt the collecting hobby in terms of aftermarket value on the real thing? Yeah, I think it can happen. Absolutely. I think it does happen. I think anytime they do a close reproduction of something vintage, it's going to affect the desirability of that vintage item to some degree. I don't think it's going to affect it to quite the degree that a lot of people think it's going to affect it, though, because here's what I mean. I think the people that are willing to pay big money for things, like let's say, for example, the big money Star Wars collector guys, right? The guys that have tens of thousands of dollars worth of Star Wars toys, vintage stuff. They're on top of it, and they know specifically which gun, not only which gun, but like they can tell just by like the hue of the plastic whether or not this gun came with a Boba Fett that was released in 1979 versus the Boba Fett that came out in 1983. Even though it's the same figure, but we know that over time the type of plastic they used for that gun changed slightly, and so this one's blue and this one's black, and you know that's not the right gun for that. Like, I see that stuff all the time, and people get really into that shit. I think those guys, I think like when they come out with like the retro collection Star Wars figures and stuff, I don't think it's going to change how much they're going to be willing to pay for the real deal. I think those guys want the real deal, period. I think like the reproduction stuff is really meant to be for more casual collectors. Now, when we start talking about repro things, like, for example, what I was just talking about, when people start making reproductions of those rare weapons, quote unquote, and all that kind of stuff, Yeah, I get that. That gets really tricky. Because a lot of people sit there and say, well, I don't want a reproduction. I want all 100% original. And I get that, but I think that as time is going on here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here. It's not my place to judge what's right and what's wrong. What I'm going to tell you is something that I feel is a hard, cold fact. As time is going on, reproducing items like these toys, reproducing these items is going to get easier and easier and easier. The average Joe can have a 3D printer in their house, getting their hands on the stuff they need, having a computer and being able to just really exactly reproduce things, whether it's an action figure, a Star Wars, little weapon, it's a vinyl Jawa cape, all those kind of things. As time is going on, it's getting easier and easier for people to reproduce those, and it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference. Now, there are a lot of people who make reproduction items, whether they make reproduction figures, they make reproduction weapons, vinyl capes, all that kind of stuff, and they make it in a way that is intentionally identifiable as a repro, because they're not trying to rip anybody off. They're not trying to scam anybody. They're just trying to provide it, because the truth of the matter is there's, a vinyl cape Jawa figure is extremely rare, and there's only a very few of them in existence in the world, but there is thousands of people who would like to own one. Now, of course, everybody would like to own the original real deal, but most of us, we're never going to be able to get it. And even if we find one, we won't be able to afford it. So most of us are like, you know what? I just want one to put on my shelf because it looks cool. I know it's not the real deal, but it looks really cool. It's a cool facsimile. It's like somebody loving a Monet painting and they go and they get a print done of it, because nobody's going to, the average, only one person in the world is going to be able to own that actual real painting, So it's not quite the same thing, but it's on the same tip, I think when they make reproduction things like that, here, for example, hang on a sec. Like, here's something I bought. I think this was a Stan Solo Creations thing. So here is a blue snaggletooth. Now, anybody that knows about collecting Star Wars figures knows that blue snaggletooth came with the Sears exclusive Cantina Adventure play set in 1978. He only came in that play set. He's very hard to get, and a regular, blue snaggletooth goes for hundreds of dollars on average. Okay. He also never came on a card like this. He never came packaged. He was just in a little sealed, clear, generic baggie in a box. That was it. So what I have here in my hand is a complete reproduction. And it's a custom item because the card is custom. This card never existed. They took a red snaggletooth one. They made it blue. This never existed. If anybody says to you they saw this on the shelves like this back when they were a kid, their memory is failing them, because this never existed like this. The figure itself is a reproduction. It's from Stan Solo Creations. So there's a lot of people that hate this. They think that this is garbage, which I get it. I understand that. But the truth of the matter is that there's a lot of identifying factors on this that if you've done, like we talked about earlier, the aforementioned education that you need to do if you're going to be spending big money. If you've done the education, you would walk into a place. If this was in a collectible store or an antique mall, you should be able to walk in and immediately know this is not the real deal. This is a facsimile. It's a custom item. Okay. It says on the back of the card, if you look at it, it says, Smith Lord Creations. It says, reproduction item. If you look on the back of the figure, there is identifying marks molded into the figure, identifying it that it is not the original blue snaggletooth. I can't afford a blue snaggletooth. I had him when I was a kid, and I loved him. Loved that figure. Unfortunately, he was lost in the 80s. and I cannot afford one now. I've been looking for one for years, and they go for hundreds of dollars. I can't justify that. So I got this, and like I said, I feel no shame about this, because anybody that knows anything about these toys, if you know it, you know what this is. Nobody's going to be ripped off by this. Nobody, and so my point is, if you go out and you spend hundreds of dollars on something like this, and then you find out later, oh man, it's not the real deal, it's your fault. Sorry, it is, because the information is out there. It's all out there. Let me say, like, I was just mentioning in the chat, it is like reproduction on vinyl records. With the exception of a few, I do not collect reproductions on anything. I even touch the retro He-Man. Too much articulation. Well, yeah, okay, that's a personal choice there and everything. Because there's repros, and then there's retro, and there's some fine lines. But those new He-Man figures are not the ones that came out from Super 7 back in the back like about 4 years ago. Something like that. Those were pretty much repros. Like, they did some very slight changes, and that's a perfect example. You want to make a repro of something, but add some changes, just like you did with like they did with this blue snaggletooth. Add some changes there that anybody that knows a bit about collecting will be able to look at it and go, "Oh, that's not an original from 1982 or whatever." I can tell that that's slightly different. That's got to be a repro. I'm all for that. I think that's great. It's only when the people make the repro stuff with the intention, and these sellers that get this stuff with the intention of scamming other people out of their money. And unfortunately, it's always going to happen. And like I said, it's getting easier and easier nowadays to do, because it's so, you got to understand, guys, these things were not made to be rare and valuable. They just happened that way by happenstance, by different things that happen. So if you're investing in this stuff and you think you're going to get rich off of this, more power to you. That's great. But be careful. Just be careful about what you're doing, and, educate yourself to prevent yourself from getting ripped off. It's one of the good things about some of these groups that I'm in on social media. There's just like anywhere else, there's some jerks in there, but there's a lot of good people in these collector groups on social media. I'm in a bunch of Star Wars ones and Mego ones and all that stuff. And if you go in there and you ask questions first, and I get it, every day I go in these groups and I see somebody, hey, I saw somebody trying to sell, something like this blue snaggletooth, and they only want, $100 for it, and that seems too good to be true. What do I need to know? And there's people that sit there and tell them, yep, that's not the real deal. That's a reproduction, and here's how you determine, here's how you know. Don't get ripped off. So that's the thing. I mean, we can sit here and wish all day long and go, well, I wish there was a way to just stop all the people from reproducing hard to find Star Wars figures and weapons and other stuff. And I wish there were, just like with, vinyl. I'm a vinyl collector. So yeah, that happens too. I wish there was some way to stop people from making counterfeit vinyl, Beatle records and Kiss records and all that stuff. There's no way. There's no way to stop it. Even things like guitars. There's all these Chinese made Gibsons and Fenders and all that stuff. I'm not saying anything bad about China, but I'm just saying that's where these originate from, these Chinese factories that make these Gibsons. And I mean, this has been going on for years, and there's just even big companies like that. They can't stop them. They just keep making them by the hundreds or thousands every year. They're out there. So all you can do, whether you're a guitar player collector or a vinyl player collector or a toy player collector, have to educate yourself, because there are telltale signs that will let you know. And once it gets to the point that there are no good telltale signs, then you probably need to ask yourself whether or not you should be spending lots and lots of money on this hobby anymore, because you might get taken. What do you do then? But that's why I said buy stuff because you love it and you have fun. That's the first and foremost thing. Buy the things you want, so then at least you're stuck with things that you really like having and means something to you. And it's not just about like, well, now the value's dropped. Well, values drop, and it happens all the time. So what do we say? All of a sudden, it just segued into you guys talking about my hair, I see, huh? Luxurious hair. Yeah. Well, I'm hanging on to it for dear life is what it comes down to. I have to part it a certain way and have it a certain way because, you know, I've got a gigantic forehead. I've got a really far back Dracula style hairline, you know, that goes way back here. Which I hate because I just have this big bulbous head. So I cover it with the hair, but as I'm getting older, it is starting to thin out. And so, you know, I'm just hanging on to it as long as I can. I'm almost 50, so I've done pretty good so far, knock on wood. I guess that's it, man. You know, this was a lot of fun. I hope you guys found some of this entertaining. For those of you that watch this later or listen to this later, please leave comments. Come join us in the Geeking Squad group on Facebook. It's free and easy to join, just as long as you behave yourself and don't act like a dillweed. We'd love to have you there because we talk about all this kind of stuff in there. I would like to thank everybody that joined me in the chat here. Sorry, I keep saying it's driving me nuts too. It's because I'm trying to divide my attention between looking at the chat. It's so much easier when I have Megan here to just like say to me like so-and-so said this so that I don't have to keep looking back and forth. Doing this is really hard on my own, boy. But anyway, I do thank Megan for being in the chat and moderating that. I'm sorry Matt wasn't here. I don't know what happened to Matt. I hope he's okay. I was looking forward to him chiming in with his stuff, but maybe next time. This will not be the last Q&A. This will definitely not be the last Geeking Toyetic episode. In fact, I have more questions. Colin, my buddy Colin, asked a bunch of really great questions that had to do more. It was a little bit more about my own personal toy collecting history, and I already touched on some of that. I didn't want to go totally about me. I did enough of that tonight. So in the future, I might do another retrospective about toy collecting that's more from my personal things. So I might be saving some of those questions that Colin put out there. And yeah, I welcome more questions coming in from you guys as soon as you start sending them in to me and everything and they pile up. I will do another Q&A. It's especially fun. I mean, I joke about it being difficult dividing my attention between the live chat and everything and the pre-selected questions, but this is a lot of fun. I love having you guys here in the chat talking to me. This is like the whole reason that I do this is to have that interaction with all of you. So by all means, and spread the word. Please, you guys, I love all you guys in the chat. Spread the word. If you have any other friends online or whatever that you're like, hey, I know you like this stuff, like check out Geeking Poetic's channel and come join in the conversation. Please, we want more people. We just finally got up to 550. We're really excited about that. We got 550 following us. That's, I know by most standards, that is paltry numbers, but it has been a struggle getting people to follow us. So we are super happy to have everybody here. Oh, we got more coming in. Thank you for doing a Toyetic. Oh, happy to do it. Happy to do it. And again, if you have specific topics, I mean, I know you guys like the Funko stuff. I'm overdue to talk about Funko. I want to do an episode where I pick my favorite Funkos that I own. I don't want to do like just general Funkos because there's thousands of them and I don't own most of them. But I have a nice little collection of them myself, and I would like to pick like maybe like my 5 favorite out of my collection and talk about why they're my favorites. So if you're Funko collectors out there and you want to get in on that, let me know because I want to do that soon. Yeah, top 10 Funkos. Yeah. Yeah, that could be a lot of fun. Exactly. There's all kinds of different topics. I would love specific topic ideas for Toyetic from you guys. We have loads of ideas for just Geeking Poetic in general. We're working on that. We'll be doing a Geeking Poetic in 2 weeks. Yeah. Not next week, but I think the week after. Matt will be back here in the studio with Megan and I, and we're going to be doing a new, I think it's a year in review one, but I'm not going to say what year it is. We haven't revealed that yet. It's going to be it's a big year, a lot to talk about. So, Any possible MCU multiverse ideas for a podcast? Oh, yeah. Whew, yeah. Well, you know what? We haven't seen Doctor Strange yet. We still need to see that. We're like getting caught up on stuff and everything. I would love to get into stuff talking about the multiverse. Man, so much. Joe says I need to send you my inventory. Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I will let you guys know when I'm going to do the Funko one. Maybe I'll do that next. Maybe that'll be the next TOYETIC I do in a couple of weeks. If I don't get to do it before I start traveling for band stuff, I'll do it as soon as I get back from all my band music traveling stuff I got to do at the end of the month in early June. Maybe we'll plan that. That'll be a good start of the summer TOYETIC episode, is talk about Funko stuff, because there's a lot to talk about. And I know some of you guys out there have it. I know Joe does, definitely. So looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Looking forward to seeing what more people have to say once this is out there, and get your feedback. Please leave those comments and join the group. Anyway, I've rambled enough. I'm Larry, and I'm out of here. So I'll see all of you guys very soon. Oh, Megan's over there typing. Are you still in the chat? Is there still people in the chat there? Oh, yeah, there is still people in the chat. Thanks. Yeah, okay. All right. I'm Audi 5000 or whatever it is. I'm old. What do I know? All right. See you, everybody.